For smartphone camera enthusiasts, one of the more interesting announcements which came out of MWC 2016 was actually pretty quiet, as Huawei and Leica announced they were entering into a long-term partnership for future smartphone cameras. So what does that mean when a traditional camera manufacturer works with a smartphone manufacturer, and how might that affect future Huawei phones? I'm Juan for Pocketnow, and we're going to take a quick look at mobile photography team-ups. For smartphones, we like to think that each manufacturer is an island and they're waging war against their competing rivals. But there's actually a lot more cooperation going on behind the scenes than many people realize. We already have a pretty good idea that Qualcomm is manufacturing a majority of the chipsets and processors for phones out in the ecosystem. Samsung might be making RAM or flash memory for phones other than Galaxies. And of course, Sony is probably the most popular camera sensor manufacturer. So how important might it be to have third-party branding for a specific phone technology? I mean, if we take a look at audio, for example, HTC has a reputation for building really high-quality music-playing phones, either from the speakers or from the headphone jack, and they've moved from Beats licensing to Dolby certification on their smartphones. So for Dolby to approve HTC slapping their logo on their phones, HTC has to have built a phone which meets the standards of Dolby licensing. A partnership for the camera is probably going to work in a similar way, but there is a little bit more room or a little bit more range for how two companies might interact with each other. If we look at a Lumia smartphone, Zeiss is the company responsible for the optics, the actual lenses in the phone, but Microsoft has their own branding for the camera sensor technology. It's called PureView. The result of that partnership is a camera with excellent optics and fantastic pixel level detail. Zeiss as a lens manufacturer doesn't seem to have any qualifications for image processing. We saw noticeable improvements for BlackBerry after a partnership deal. The camera on the Passport I would have rated as acceptable. There's a huge jump moving up to the Priv. Now the Priv is utilizing a Schneider lens. And again, we saw improvements to pixel level detail, clarity, contrast, and color. Now, part of that is also just the image processing. The camera app on the BlackBerry was a huge improvement over the Passport, but that's a pretty magical combination when you can improve both software and hardware in one generation. Now, some manufacturers are able to achieve very good results even when they're building everything themselves. Everything's in-house. Samsung is probably the gold standard for a company which can do everything, from the fabrication of the image sensor to grinding the glass to create all of the lenses for their Galaxy smartphones. Though when we look at manufacturers that don't have the same kind of in-house experience at building their own camera equipment, and they don't have any kind of third-party relationship with some kind of camera manufacturer, we do see a few weaknesses. The LG V10 is packing my favorite overall camera experience, but the lens performance on this phone is actually one of its weakest aspects. It's a little more prone to aberrations and distortions, but that's got to be weighed against having one of the absolute best camera apps I've ever seen, some fantastic image processing and color rendition, and they're currently the only manufacturer taking into account things like audio control while shooting video, which in a roundabout way brings us back to Huawei. Now, Huawei makes good cameras for their phones. This is the Honor 5X, $200 phone, perfectly reasonable camera experience at that price point. And before MWC, we put out our review on the Mate 8, which had a respectable camera, it just wasn't anything mind-blowing. What's interesting about this partnership, Leica in the past has been a very conservative or traditional company. A long time ago, they built their reputation for building incredible film cameras with fantastic lenses. If you take a second to look up what a rangefinder camera is, chances are probably pretty good that they're going to use a Leica as the example. And for many of their more recent camera bodies, they're actually taking parts from Panasonic and kind of tweaking them to their own Leica standards. If a Huawei Leica partnership is more than just skin deep, more than just Leica supplying a couple lens elements for Huawei phones, we could actually see some pretty terrific benefits for both companies. Huawei earns instant respect from camera enthusiasts in much the same way that many people celebrate the Zeiss optics on Lumia phones. But Leica stands to benefit from having a firm producing bleeding-edge technology which can introduce Leica branding to a completely new demographic of consumers. We already know that Leica and Panasonic have a pretty decent relationship, and Panasonic has tried to produce their own Android-powered hardware in the past with the CM1. Huawei, working with Leica and utilizing Panasonic's 1-inch camera sensor, could be an evolutionary leap over how we currently produce smartphone cameras. That's really grandiose long-term thinking, kind of my personal wish list for what I hope to see in a future smartphone. Now, thanks to Leak Master General 11 blahs, we've already seen some really high quality slides on what the Huawei P9 is going to look like. And that's going to be the first phone with Leica branding. And one of the interesting things about that phone is it's going to be a dual camera sensor device. Now this is a really early leak, so we don't quite know yet how those dual cameras are going to interact with each other. If they're going to be used for depth of field tricks or 3D imaging, similar to what HTC was trying to do on the M8, or if one camera sensor is a wider angle lens and another's a narrower angle lens like we see on the LG G5, or if they're just two of the exact same sensors designed to help improve low light imaging and HDR performance thanks to advanced software compositing. It's really exciting watching one of the highest selling smartphone manufacturers partner up with such a well-respected camera brand, and I think the benefits for both companies here could be profound. But of course, we want to hear from you. What improvements do you most want to see in a future smartphone camera? Better optics, higher resolution sensors, larger sensors, faster frame rates, better image processing? Definitely drop a comment below. This is the kind of stuff I love getting into, and hopefully we'll find some really fun debates down in the comments. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more in-depth coverage on smartphone content creation topics, and be sure to hit that thumbs up button for a little extra positive reinforcement. For Pocketnow, I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell. You can chat me up on Twitter and Instagram as Some Gadget Guy, and I will catch you all on the next video. Now, you know you're a camera snob when you keep your phones on tables face down because you're more worried about scratching the lens cover than you are the screen.